Hey, welcome back, Paul.
Hello, mate. Good to be back.
Good to hear from you again. How are you doing?
I'm lovely and back from the grave.
Awesome. Being back from the grave is a really good thing to do. I wish I had that
Invigorating.
ability.
It's like a nice cold shower. I love it.
Well, I'm glad you're not dead. You know what would have been really cool if you had died, though?
What's that?
You
How?
could have haunted a house.
Ooh, that sounds.
Just like Alone in the Dark. We're going to talk about Alone in the Dark today, for those of you who did not pick up on that.
I forgot what we were going to be talking about halfway through that. I'm glad you said it again. Yes, we're here to talk about Alone in the Dark, a groundbreaking game with the ultimate conflict. The house wants you dead, and you don't want to die.
Yeah, and it's going to be successful a lot because the thing with Alone in the Dark, which I don't even know what most people really thought at the time because, without the internet, everyone sort of games in their own little bubble. But interesting design of Alone in the Dark back then, which is sort of a template for what we know as survival horror today, is that you pretty much learned everything through dying from something first. So you basically do something, it kills you, and then you know not to do that next time. There's really not ways to figure things out before they happen. You just have to make sure that you save your game before anything could possibly happen. So like there's the opening scene. You start in the attic, and then you have like about 5 seconds before a monster breaks through the window and you have to fight it. Now, once you know that the monster comes in through the window, then you can push a shelf in front of that window so that it will just smack into the shelf like a bird flying into the window, and then it can't get to you. And it's like, okay, great. And then a trap door opens and another monster comes up out of there. And you're like, okay, well, now that I know that monster is going to come up from out of there, I'm going to push a chest over the trap door so that he can't get up. So much of the game is just figuring out what's going to kill you, because it just killed you.
That's actually quite a level-headed way to put it, as putting the rage-quitting frustrations aside. You're right, yeah. And I love how in the beginning, to kind of illustrate your point, is the game keeps you on such edge throughout the whole thing, which is such a brilliant tactic on that part. Because, like you said, when you're in the basement or attic or whatever, you get attacked almost right away, and from that point on, from that first couple of seconds, you just don't trust the game for its entirety. Like the environment is deemed untrustable. You're on edge. It's nerve-wracking, and then to your point, it's like you die, so you save it, and then you get attacked pretty quickly after that, and you save it. So it basically sets you up to just save every 6 seconds for the whole game.
Yeah.
Even though you don't need to.
With no autosave, so you don't know what's going to happen until after it happens. Hopefully you saved recently. But
yes.
And again, it's one of those things where like, if a game did that today, you would probably look back upon it and be like, oh, that's poor game design. And it kind of is. I can't really argue that it's not poor game design, but I don't know. There was just something about it that worked then, and maybe not everyone agrees with me. Maybe people did play it and they're kind of like, this is kind of too hard, this is stupid. And I definitely, even a lot of classic games, I kind of think it's unfair to teach people through dying, through killing them off repeatedly, what they need to do. But for some reason, is just I think because it's a survival horror and because it's a very early survival horror, it actually kind of works because the game, like you said, it kind of screws with you. It messes with you. When you play the game, for the first few times before a surprise encounter, they play this like dramatic chord and some like something's coming to get you music, right?
Right.
So I'll play this like dun, and then this tune like dun 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 dun. So it feels like something's going to come get you. Then after a while through the game just plays it every once in a while, even if nothing's there, just to mess with you. And you're like, oh dear Lord. Yeah. And you're trained by now that every time you hear that, you're going to die because, you don't know how to deal with things until after you've already been killed by it. So you'll just be walking down the hall I'll just be walking down the hall, and suddenly it's like, dun dun. It's like, what the hell? No, god damn, I can't die right now. I've done too many things. And then it turns out to be a false alarm. The game actually gives you false alarms.
Oh, that is such a mindfuck. They did such a good job with that, whether it was on purpose or not. It adds a new modern element to it. Like, might be good with $60 PS4 games, but you go back to the old one, it will still fuck with you.
And it was funny because like Resident Evil became so much more popular and more successful than Alone in the Dark, even though it was so much about it was borrowed from Alone in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the parts that I actually found scary about Alone in the Dark. I actually didn't really care too much for the original Resident Evil because it was basically zombies, right? And I love zombies, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't think it was as scary because if something wasn't a zombie or a zombie dog or something that's obviously like, oh, this thing's going to kill you because it's running up to you, flailing its arms, you know that generally it's not going to kill you unless it's very obvious. Whereas in Alone in the Dark, you had no idea what was going to end up killing you. You sort of walk around and like, oh, hey, here's a suit of armor. I'm going to search that suit of armor because something might be in it. Oh, guess what? It's actually a possessed suit of armor. And because you touched it, it's going to kill you now. And there's a time where you walk into like an art room and suddenly there's a little cutaway to one of the paintings. And it's like, oh, something's significant about that painting. And it turns out what's significant about it is that it is now trying to kill you.
That's a fair point. God.
So that's kind of like the paranoia that's set in this in Alone in the Dark is the fact that like you have no idea what anything like, you have no idea if anything's coming for you because they'll play the dramatic chord just for the hell of it once in a while. You have no idea what objects are useful versus what's going to come alive and destroy you. So many of the monsters that you come across, you don't really know until you try if they're actually killable, because I think like 75% of the things in the game aren't. Like you can't do anything to defend yourself against them. It's one of those games where it's just number one, the atmosphere is just so much creepier than a lot of games like with far better production and graphics compared to just like the polygons, like very low polygon count 3D models. But just it knew how to like just get that Pavlovian response of sheer horror and terror out of you far more than something that's just like gory, fast moving, and eating your face.
Yes. And so it was simpler times, in other words, but going back, it still works all over again because you're not used to being mistreated like that from a game. If paintings are an option, then everything's off the table or whatever. Like, if a painting can kill you, then I couldn't even walk 5 feet without being paranoid.
Yeah.
But I do like the Alone in the Dark is kind of what you're touching on a little bit. It's kind of got that like you're hunted. It has like a voyeuristic feel to it. Mm-hmm. There's these cutaways with the camera where like you're outside the window looking in at your own character. You kind of feel like you're being watched, which is creepy, and it hones in on that a little bit.
And a lot of those games back then, they kind of used the tank controls, which are ever so popular, but and they're never really that great even to begin with. But I don't know, I felt it kind of worked for this particular game. Not that it wasn't awkward and clunky, because it totally was, but it's because of all like those weird dramatic camera angles and quick cuts. You kind of have to just understand that as long as you hold the up button, you are going in the same direction that you were before, because it like cuts all over the place. And suddenly you're walking up the screen, suddenly you're walking to the left, suddenly you're walking down, because it's just like the camera just changes angles so often. It's hard to know if you were just going to do like straight up is up and down is down. It was so easy to get lost because you don't know which way you're supposed to be going anymore. But now that you actually have that ability to sort of stay the course, that's what up is, basically stay the course, then the game can be a lot more creative and a lot more experimental with a lot of the angles and the scenes that they put you through.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that's good. I remember that was the first time I saw, I guess SolWorks done scene helicopter cam with like in a PC game at all. I think it was the first time at least I had ever experienced it, and therefore the advent of having my character's forehead pressed into a wall while his feet are walking into it. You know, and they're frantically trying to back up the camera, move it around like that. Really messed with me. But it was cool that they kind of innovated on a lot of levels. I mean, they should probably get a lot of credit for basically. I think I don't know if it's even arguable being the first survival horror game. Definitely popular.
Pretty I think it's as far as I know, it's probably the first of what we consider survival horror today.
Right.
I'm sure if you fiddle around with the semantics, you can come up with earlier game titles, but this is, at the very least, even if it's not the first survival horror, it's definitely the template upon which all survival horror kind of spawned from thereafter.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to put it. That was actually rather political. It was very factual. Nobody can really rebut that. I like it, even though I'm trying to. I don't like to play with semantics much, so I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
I can't spell the word semantic, for example. It's
Well,
things like this.
Yeah, but I mean, it's semantics is one of those topics that's sort of hard to really come to any sort of conclusion on, because it's like, oh, you can go on about what is an RPG these days. Before it used to be so clear, but now everyone's sort of like, oh, a role-playing game is Mario because you're playing the role of Mario. It's like, that's not what that means. Like, oh, but semantically, it's like, so yeah. I'm sure you can say like, oh, well, I guess they came out at this in the same year, but you could be like, oh, Wolfenstein 3D is survival horror. It's like, why? Because you're trying to survive and it's scary that things are shooting at you. It's like, that's not what we're talking about when we're going on about survival horror.
Yeah, adventure games are role-playing games because you're playing the role of somebody in an adventure, and role-playing games are adventure games because you're going on an adventure.
Yeah. So it's a pretty broken system of categorizing genres. It's like, oh, I'm playing the role of Pac-Man. His goal is to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
I leveled up by eating everything on the screen.
Yeah, I would actually argue that Pac-Man is survival horror, you see, because you're being chased by scary things.
There you go. The first survival horror game, probably one of the first, if not the first, is Pac-Man. Right? But,
just had an accidental breakthrough.
Wow, I totally didn't even think about that, but you're almost correct. Like, again, if we want to define survival horror as that, you're trying to survive. There's ghosts. Then sure.
They were probably right scary in 75.
I'm sure they're really terrifying under the right contexts. You had to pay $0.25 for each time you play. I'm going to be pretty terrified when I run out of power pellets.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They're trying to take from your bread and milk and stuff. That's your living.
But yeah, so I mean, I don't think anyone really necessarily looks back on Alone in the Dark negatively, especially if you've played it back then. But I know that I don't know anyone who's really played it recently that hasn't played it before. I haven't seen any reviews online or anything of people who go back and play it for the first time today. But I can imagine it doesn't age well, because even for me, it didn't age well. Even when I went back, it finally came out on GOG. I was like, oh, yeah, that game. That's one of my favorites. And I put it on. It's like, this is horrible. What the hell is going on?
Horrendous, mate. It is one of the worst aging games of all. And that answers my question, what I was getting at, really, because I was kind of luring you into comparing it to Doom, because Doom is known as the godfather of a genre. And I look at, Alone in the Dark as a godfather of a slightly different genre, but not to do the semantics game again. And I was kind of getting at, like, why isn't it as well, like, household name as Doom in the gamer world as being something that basically popularized an entire genre? And I think that's why, because you could play Doom again as long as you like pixel graphics, but this game is really hard to chew through again now. It's fucking horrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's because, especially with scary, like the werewolf. So whatever the first thing that kills you in Alone in the Dark looks like a Muppet.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
With Kermit the Frog arms, like flailing about and everything. It's not that scary. So,
to this day, I don't even really know what that actually is, to be honest.
I'm not sure either. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 4. I will say, before they got into the polygons, like the intro of the game, I remember as a kid, it again with that voyeuristic camera thing that they show you pulling in the driveway through a windowsill, and it's got these like demon hands holding onto the window. And when I just remember being a kid, how that was chilling and scary.
Oh, absolutely. Anything in the game that doesn't require polygons is beautiful.
Right. Yeah. True.
Like the scenery, because it's not moving scenery, it's a sort of it's basically static shots that you walk through, and they're all the environment is great. It's awesome, but anything that involves moving, they only really had like whatever, like 10 polygons that they can construct a
Yeah.
person and or a monster, and you get that a little bit of that clash between a very nice handcrafted, hand painted, almost, it looks like it anyways, half painted background, and then you get like the stick man.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It was like the introduction to how video games will put out like trailers or commercials that only show the cutscenes,
Yeah.
and then you play it and you're like, oh, that's kind of. I mean, it was kind of the invent of that, where you're really like, oh, this really set me up for something nice, and then you get to what you actually get to play with, like, oh god.
Mhm.
But no, at the time it was. I mean, I don't think it was actually even really quote like good at the time, even though it was pretty much the first we'd ever seen it. But it was groundbreaking, and you knew it.
Yeah.
You know, with the again the what you call it, the tank camera. You know, it had to be 3DS polygonish to implement them things. So you knew it was had to start somewhere, and this was sort of something just different and cool. Even though I think at the time it was fair to say, because I mean it's not like back in the day we were cavemen. Like we had television, we were aware of like what good and bad things looked like. And I think I just remember not being like blown away by the graphics at all. Just thinking it was
Not blown
something
away,
different.
but it was acceptable.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
it was definitely. I didn't think like, oh, when I played it, I was just sort of,
That's
okay, well
true.
that's a thing.
Right.
That's how it goes, and I didn't think one way or another. So I mean, that in itself is not a bad thing. If I just don't even notice it, it's sort of okay. Well, here's a game that I'm playing now.
Right.
But the problem is, you play it now, and boy, do you notice it. Because like you said, pixel art ages well. Pixel art will almost always look like pixel art. But polygons, there's something about taking it from those, like when a monitor was actually natively like 320 pixels or something, whatever the actual number is, versus, oh, now we're playing it on like 1080 or 4K screens or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to look as good when arguably it already wasn't that great. It was breakthrough. I wouldn't say, but like you said, it was breakthrough, but not necessarily great. But
It was fine.
imagine what it's like now.
Oh, yeah, it's straight hard on the eyes.
When you can see every jagged edge. Yeah, when you see every jagged edge of every triangle that's a limb of yours.
And you don't even have to focus in on it. This isn't like nitpicking. Like the main character's eyes are not the same shape at all.
Yeah, that's right.
At all. Not even close.
I think
One's
they
like
like
a
might be
diamond, there's a
detached from his
rectangle.
head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes Grim Fandango look like Avatar. Like it's really really rudimentary.
But that's why it kind of needs to be remembered for how awesome it was at the time, because it was truly an awesome game. It was one of those games that I would actually play through it once a day for a good little while, because I just wanted to know everything. Like, what happens if I do this? Once you get through and you pass it the first time with a walkthrough, of course, because I'm not that good. But after I finished it, it was one of those things where like, well, anything can happen, so let's find out all the stuff that happens. So let's touch and push everything to see what's going to come up and kill me, because now I'm not scared anymore. But kind of also still a little bit terrified, because you just never know what's going to happen when.
yeah, no, that's absolutely a good point. It's funny. That just reminded me of like I think the first point you brought up in the episode was, just talking about how was it borderline kind of almost bad design. It was that punishing, and I kind of chalk it up to like just the times, I guess. Like it just reminds me now, comparing it to like adventure games at the time, they were just savage. So I think we accepted that back in the
Yeah,
day. Like
absolutely.
that was life as we knew it. So we're like, yeah, of course you got to save a lot. But looking back, it's like you said, you every like 12 feet you're saving the game.
There's one scene in particular that just really sticks out for me. Is the you go into this room. It's like one of the first rooms that you come across in the game, and yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen a game do this since, but you go into the room and there is, I forget if there's an object that you need out of there, but there's a few things that are searchable. So you're going to have to like investigate the room. And at one part of, like in the center of the room, there's like a ghost sitting in a chair, just staring at the wall, and it's just there, not moving.
Oh,
And
that's eerie.
this is one of the things where if you touch it, it's gonna kill you. So you gotta like really carefully just walk around it, And even to this day, when I do play it, not to this day literally, because it's been a while since I've played it, but even as of the last time I played it, it was nerve wracking because I just didn't want to accidentally nudge into this thing and wake it up to kill me. And just so already like having played through it a few times, it's terrifying because number
Right.
one, it's just the blocking of it, just the way it's set up, just like this pink blob of a ghost in a sort of a roughly human shape, just sitting there, and you can see its eyes, and that's basically the only real features you can really determine, and it's just sitting facing the opposite wall from you.
I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah,
Yes, it reminds me of that scene in Pan's Labyrinth. If you've seen that movie, where
yeah,
the
absolutely.
little girl walks in on the monster with the eyeballs in his hands,
Hmm.
and he's just dead still at the dining room table, and she's like, got to sneak right around him, right up against him. As long as you don't eat
Hmm.
fruit, you won't wake up, sort of thing. But yeah, it makes it even more eerie when it's the enemy's stagnant, like just that confidently just sitting. I know what you mean. It gives me
Yeah.
chills, and so therefore the game did a great job because even with the kind of mind fucks in the music, like with these sort of examples, the good and the questionable, it still got in your head. It affected your heart rate, and that's impressive.
Yeah.
There's thousands of games that's their problem is they didn't get to the heart, they didn't get in your head.
Hmm.
So I think as long as the game's doing that, like you said, even as a replay and looking back on it, like a horror game in its fetal stage, it was still able to make us unsettled nowadays. That's really
Yeah.
impressive.
And the first time you play through that scene, when you don't know like anything about it, is that you don't want to touch it, but is it allowed to see you? Like, are you allowed to? What's going to happen? Is it's just sitting there? It's not like these, as much as I love all these games now, where you kind of have to hide from the monster all the time. You have to hide from the monster. You can't let it see you, or things that are going to come after you, and you have a gun. You should probably shoot it to make it stop. But this one is it's just there. It's like, well, what do I do? Like, do I walk quietly? Am I allowed to run around? Am I allowed to like be within its peripheral vision? Like, what, you just didn't know, and that's what's so nerve wracking about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. People they should employ that tactic a lot more, and you never see it anymore, or really at all, I guess. Period.
Hmm.
And it's such a good way to put someone off. And like you said, the first time you play it, you don't know that just that you don't touch it. You're thinking the whole time it's gonna just do a jump scare on you as you're working your way by it.
Hmm. And like, if you don't touch it, it doesn't do anything, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. It really is unsettling. Like flying a kite at nighttime. Something weird about it.
Yeah. And I think like even at this point, one of the things that the game does, I think, is one of the very first items it gives you is a shotgun. So it's
It's
already kind of
intense.
like, at first you're kind of, I mean, not that we really overthought it at the time, but looking back on it, it's like, well, a lot of horror is about taking away your sense of power. So to give you a shotgun really early in the game is kind of like, oh, well, now I can just shoot everything. It's like, that's not going to help you. Like, if anything, it establishes how powerless you are,
That's so
because
true.
the number of things you can actually kill with that shotgun is very few.
I remember being really hard to use as well to aim.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Because you had to like use the arrow keys to like rotate yourself in roughly the direction and shoot and hope that you were actually aligned with it. It's the aiming was horrible.
The devs were masterminds of false illusions because there's really nothing more scary. The only thing more scary than not having a gun is having one that you can't work. It's like a dream when you can't make a fist. There's just this like oh, you made it worse by giving me an ineffectual weapon. Now it's just a lot more panic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool game all around. I mean, it's besides the way it looks, it still plays through well, and I think you can get through it with a walkthrough and some luck, in like an hour, I think.
It is pretty short. Once you know everything that you're supposed to do.
That's true. Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's also
probably.
some cool things like a lot of the. I mean, granted, like I said, there is a lot of things killing you before you have a chance to really understand what's going on, and therefore you have to restore. But there's also some interesting puzzles. Like, there are clues and allusions to how you're supposed to get through certain areas, or which creatures can be killed in certain ways, and you have to figure those out by reading the different books that you find here and there in the game. So you always search bookshelves. You have to actually read through the text. It's not like these days where they're just lore books that just sort of like do world building. Like, these are actually important to solving the puzzles if you've never played
Right.
it before.
That's yeah, and that's a really cool angle too. along with the inventory thing, it definitely has some adventure feel to it as far as the
Mhm.
puzzles and inventory objects. Inventory was weird too because I remember once you used it, like you could only carry so much, so you had to decide when to drop something or not.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, I think that's right.
Which I never liked when games did that, just because we've already established that this doesn't actually fit in their pockets. We get it. Like it's really, I don't like when I actually do that. But this game, they justified it by I think you had a maximum weight of your inventory. So once you exceeded the weight, you had to lose items. And I thought that was actually something that's kind of cool that I'd almost like to see in some adventure games.
Right.
Where like as long as you put like checks and balance in there, like there's a reason to it. Then it could be made to be part of the game. Like part of the
Hmm.
grand puzzle itself, deciding what to hold on to and what to drop and stuff. But they weren't like merciless because you could go back to where you dropped it and get it.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was
right.
kind
Yeah, it'll just sit on the floor. And to be honest, it's like I actually forgot. I still don't. I'm not even like can't even 100% confirm if that's the case. Just because I think if they did do that, and they probably did, if you remember it, but it just never really even came up. Like, it was actually pretty forgiving. It's not like you can only carry like 5 things and you need 7. It's like there was quite a bit of stuff that you just that you were allowed to carry with you.
Yes, yeah, it did seem unnecessary.
Hmm.
The whole thing, even having to drop it.
So really, if you reach that level where you need to drop something, that's a game kind of telling you you're a bit of a pack rat, and
Right.
you
Yeah.
don't need the stuff right now.
Yeah. Thank you for exposing my tendency to hoard things.
And it's really cool. One of the things that it does is that it blatantly, right on the box, says that it's incredibly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. And boy, did they double down on that. Like, they just completely. I don't know. I think there's actually Cthulhu games that don't feel as Lovecraft as Alone in the
Right.
Dark did.
That's so true, yeah.
I think if there's one thing that I'd really want to revive from Alone in the Dark today, with all the, I guess it's been like 20, 25 years or something like that of game design improvements that have happened since. And with like modern graphics and stuff like that, so things aren't just like paper dolls. Basically, it'd be nice to have a horror game where you don't know necessarily what's a hazard or not, what's a threat. Because these days, like I said about Resident Evil, it's like if it's not a zombie or a zombie dog, you know it's going to not kill you. But in Alone in the Dark, it's like, well, you have no idea what's going to kill you or not. These things are, here's a statue. Do I search it because something might be important in there? Or do I not search it because it might kill me?
Right, yes. That's a polarizing line to draw in the sand, but it's like, either get up close to it and investigate it or run from it. One of the
Yeah.
two, we'll see.
Yeah. There's actually a really cool moment in Resident Evil Code Veronica, which is actually probably my favorite Resident Evil game. And there's a hallway or something. I forget exactly. It's been a long time, but there's like a hallway or a room or something, and you walk through, and there's like this big like I think it was like a doll, like maybe a China doll or something like that. This really big creepy thing, just sitting there. And like when I first saw it, when I came onto the screen, I was like, oh dear lord, that's really creepy and terrifying. And that lasted for about like 2 seconds before I'm like, but it's not going to do anything to me. Like
Right, yeah.
it's atmospheric, but it's not like it's just going to come alive and kill me because it's not a zombie. So what do I care?
That's such a good point. It happens so many times in games. You first walk into the screen and you're like, "Oh my god, it's terrifying," and then a couple of seconds and it's like, "All right, now how do we get around it?"
Yeah, but like if that exact same scene had been in Alone in the Dark, it'd be like, okay, what do I do?
Oh,
This thing is
yeah.
clearly going to kill me, isn't it? Like this thing's obviously here to do something, and it's not good, and it's not going to be passive. I don't think either. Whereas in a Resident Evil game, it's sort of like, oh yeah, that's just decoration and it's creepy.
Yeah, you're right. It's that's the best thing they've done is it's got that feel of like what do you call it? Like Halloween Horror Nights. Like one of them, like where you walk through like a haunted corn maze sort of thing, and
Right.
you don't know really. It's so dark and confusing. You're not sure what's a person in a costume like knelt over and what's just like a stack of hay. So like you don't know what's gonna jump out and scare you at any given second, and that's basically like alone in the dark. So always the worst part of like doing those like little horror walk things through like hay or whatever was like I think I remember in that there was like the one guy in the center of the room just standing there. And you're just telling yourself, like, all right, when I bought the ticket, he said they can't touch you if you don't touch them. It's really scary, and this game did that really well. It's almost like walking through a haunted maze or something because you don't know what the rules are here. It's just paranoia from being attacked 6 seconds into the game onwards. You never put your guard down.
On a tangent, I just thought I'd bring this up just because you mentioned like those little haunted house little attractions at the theme parks. I went through one many years ago with my friends, and the lineup was so long for this thing that the only way they're going to get through them is to just send like this continual line of people to go through the house. Like they normally, I think they're supposed to just like let a few people in room by room so that they can reset. Like they can just do their little jump scare reset, then let the next group through, right? But this time, I guess they just wanted to get through everyone, and it was like such a huge line that they just like it was just on this continuous line of people walking through. So we were just like a couple people back from anything that happened. So the people in front of us would go in, they would do the jump scare, and we'd see them get scared. But by the time we get into the room, we'd see everyone walking back into their places, and they wouldn't even be fully back until we were already like almost out of the room, and we basically miss it, and so they could scare the next people behind us.
You could like count down to 5 for the people behind you, and there it is. That's kind of messed up.
All right. Well, any last thoughts on Alone in the Dark? When did you play? Did you play it when it was just freshly out?
Yeah, I played it when it was freshly out as a kid, and then I've replayed it probably close to when you did because it was right close to when it came out on GOG. Download
right.
it and gave it a run through. I think I played like 20 minutes before getting a walkthrough and just saying I did it because the visual situation. But yeah, what about you? About the same thing as a kid?
I think so. Yeah, I might have been like maybe I'm pretty sure I played it like right when it came out at my friend's place. I think it might have took another couple years before I personally had a computer that could run it, and then I played it like a whole bunch of times. But I'm pretty sure I played it when it was new. At any rate, I played it quite a bit well before Resident Evil came out. And that's actually kind of why I didn't really like the first Resident Evil, just because at the time I was so, I felt like it was such a ripoff of Alone in the Dark. And I felt that it was getting more popular than the game that actually deserved to have that popularity. And I felt that Resident Evil was just sort of like kind of a step down in all, other than like all the technology, because things looked a lot better and animated better and all that sort of thing. But other than that, the actual horror elements, the actual gameplay, I thought was a step back from Alone in the Dark. So that's why I never really liked the first Resident Evil. I eventually came to grow to really like the series before 4. I didn't like the direction it went in after that. But the first one I didn't quite like, but 2, 3, and Code Veronica, fantastic games.
Yeah, I never really got into the series. The only one I actually played was 4, but I played it with someone else, so that made it a really cool experience, but I guess not enough to buy 5 or 6 or whatever. Because if there wasn't someone else to play it with, I was kind of a wuss about it. But anyway,
Fatal Frame, you got to play Fatal Frame. That's a creepy one.
Is that before 4?
Fatal Frame, when did that come out? Probably around that era. I don't know exactly chronologically when, but it's probably around that era.
Right, cool.
But it is kind of more of a Japanese horror style of the genre. So it's like cool. So it's pretty terrifying, very like Ring and Grudge type of thing.
Right, like speaking of the Ring and Grudge, the girl in Clock Tower always reminded me of them, or vice versa.
Yeah, actually, you know who the girl from Clock Tower is based on? It's actually based on Jennifer Connelly from Phenomena. Dario Argento made Phenomena, starring Jennifer Connelly. This is like off the top of my head and not off of Wikipedia that I'm reading from. It was made in 1985. So that's basically the inspiration for Clock Tower.
Oh, it does look like her. Well, the very first screenshot. I could see that. Oh, did you see that picture of her wearing like a guy's suit?
No, I'm not looking at anything related to it right now.
Ah, okay.
So it's actually really kind of cool how much, now that I think of it, that there's so many different like little subgenres of horror that's been represented in video games right by now. You know, Alone in the Dark covered the Lovecraftian, uh, Fatal Frame covered the J horror, Clock Tower covered the Italian, what's it called, giallo style.
I didn't even know that existed till now.
hmm Yeah, Alone in the Dark is a game that is really hard to play now. It really did not age well, but I just, to this day, I just love talking about it because it just did so many really cool, interesting, and just good things with the horror idea. It's just, yeah, there's so many things that I wish games nowadays would really learn from it. And even like when they've tried to reboot it like twice, they never really quite captured it. They didn't understand what it was that made the original Alone in the Dark so scary. I haven't played any of the, actually wait, I didn't play Alone in the Dark 2, but I did play Alone in the Dark 3, and even by then it was like a good enough game, but not quite as creepy and haunting as the original one was. I think the third
Yeah,
one was like Cowboys or something.
yeah, they completely just bought the namesake on that. On that, in my opinion, they bought the
Mhm.
name, kept the character the same name, and that was it. It was just yeah. You're right. Like they didn't analyze what really worked for the game, and just basically, I think they started playing catch up with like Resident Evil and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Well, I learned in my absence there was a lot of murders while I was gone, so don't do murders.